State Senate District 7 with two such great leaders who have stood for so many years for working families and democratic principles. So I am pleased to be here tonight to join with you to welcome them. And I'm happy to introduce to you Senator Mark DeSaulnier, who has been a strong advocate for schools, infrastructure, and public safety in our area, and we have been pleased to have him represent us for many years. Mark was elected in this area more than 20 years ago as a public official. He served 2 terms on the Concord City Council as a council member and mayor, and 3 terms on the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors. Senator DeSaulnier was elected to the Assembly in 2006, where he authored and co-authored more than 60 bills. Elected to the Senate in 2008, he has served on he serves on more committees than I could count, but that's at least 13, including one of the budget subcommittees, and is chair of the very influential Transportation and Housing Committee. And while there, he has continued to show his support for Contra Costa County for our important transportation issues, such as bringing BART to East Contra Costa, widening Highway 4, and something very important to those of us here in Orinda, the 4th bore of the Caldecott Tunnel, which will do a lot for congestion. While in the legislature, Mark's top legislative priority has been to reform state governance law, and that includes a comprehensive package of reforms proposed by California Forward. On a personal note, I cannot thank Senator DeSaulnier and his staff enough because of the support that they give to local elected officials like me. He has never forgotten his roots, never forgotten that he came from being a local elected official, and he and his staff work very closely with the council members and the county representatives here in Contra Costa County. He serves as a legislative liaison to us at the Contra Costa County Mayor's Conference and supports us in trying to provide the kind of local services that our constituents need every day on the ground here in our own communities, our roads, our schools, our public safety, our infrastructure, healthcare, all those things that we all depend on, and we need the assistance of our legislative representatives to find grant funding and help us find the money to provide those services. So I am very proud to work alongside Senator DeSaulnier in representing the citizens of Orinda, and I would ask you to put your hands together and welcome him here tonight.
I didn't prepare an introduction for George, so I don't know if it'll be as long as that. I appreciate it, Victoria. Some of it actually was nonfiction. Well, first of all, I really want to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's always very inspiring to come home from Sacramento. I know Congressman Miller feels the same way from Washington. We are really fortunate to have George, but I think he will say this because he always says it. I think all of us who represent you are really fortunate to have amazing constituents. This is a very high voter turnout area, but it's not just high voter turnout, which is of course the first thing we want from citizens in this democracy, but we also want knowledgeable and passionate constituents, and you do that. And it's both a responsibility and a reward to represent you because you expect a lot out of us. And in George's case, you get it every time, and I hope that I live up to those expectations. I wanted to, before I bring the main attraction up here, I did want to mention, because I was asked, some of the efforts and the importance of transparency and your voice in your state government, and George will speak, of course, to the federal government. But money has always been an issue about power and communication and voice in politics. Jess Unruh, the former Speaker of the California State Assembly, once said famously, money is the mother's milk of politics. So it's not to be naive about the fact that in this country, the ability to raise funds as a candidate is important for issues. But clearly in the last 10 years, and now with Citizens United, the importance of money and the industry around communicating has been transformed. So the relationship between the media markets, our campaign consultants, focus groups, and donations, and the influence that those donations have on the decision-making process have become, in my view, completely perverted. it's become perverted to the point, in California in particular, because our initiative system, there's a whole industry around getting initiatives passed in California, and the size and the profitability of people who are able to misrepresent often what the issues are. And I want to speak just briefly on one particularly important initiative in California. It's Prop 32. There have been multiple efforts by business interests, and I have nothing against business interests. I believe there's a balance between, as Lincoln once famously said, in order for American democracy to work, there's got to be a balance between capital and labor. And Lincoln said, if there's ever a disadvantage to capital sides, American democracy will fail. And there are many of us who will say that that, in fact, is happening right now. Well, Prop 32 is just another effort by very large businesses, people who I don't think are terribly interested in Main Street businesses, to make it almost impossible for labor and ordinary people who are affiliated with a union in California to be able to contribute to people who will support their views. Now, labor are human institutions, and sometimes they do things that we don't all agree with, but they're the voice of working people in California. And if Prop 32 passes, it will decimate the ability for not just for organized labor, but for average people to be able to contribute to campaigns, both for individuals and for the initiative, that are counterbalanced to the huge amount of money being invested by the private sector, and mostly in business. And Lincoln, also another line he used in this regard was, he once said that during the Civil War, he said, I have the Confederate Army in front of me, and I have the Northern banks behind me, and I fear the latter more. So it's not against anybody, it's just Lincoln couldn't have been wiser. There's a balance in here, and we're clearly losing the balance, and you lose your voice in democracy. And in California, you shouldn't be losing your voice, you should be gaining your voice. So with that, I will stop, and I will bring on the main attraction, the Rocky Balboa of the U.S. House of Representatives, a man who really needs no introduction. One of my favorite stories is, if you can get this on YouTube, is George getting so animated and passionate on the floor of the House of Representatives, he broke the podium. I've never seen it. It's a thing of beauty. He didn't seem startled at all. I don't know if the Republicans have ever sent an invoice for that. But George has been in the United States House of Representatives since 1974. He's one of the most influential members of the Congress, and particularly of the Democratic minority, hopefully soon majority again. He's chaired the Natural Resources Committee for many years. He has chaired the Labor and Education Committee for many years. In the latter, he protected our environment here in California and the United States. In the latter, he has tried to improve education for all working people, working kids and families. And most importantly, just recently in that role, when he was still chair, he was instrumental in the passage of the Health Care Act. And he was passionate, and he was one of the three, I think. So we're lucky to have him. He's one of the most genuine, passionate people I know about public service. I couldn't have a better role model. We couldn't have a better representative in the House of Representatives, Congressman George Miller.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. This is very exciting. Thank you for your interest in the issues that are before the Congress and the state legislature. I think Mark's going to hang around for a little while. We may ham and egg some of your questions where it crosses our jurisdictional boundaries. If you
who's the ham?
If you were, you're earning that reputation. But I want to thank you very much. I want to thank Honorable Miranda Demms and Move On for putting out a call for people to come and listen to us. It's a critical time in our country. It's clearly I think it's one of, in my time in public service, this is one of the most critical times that we have witnessed. But I also just want to thank Mark so much for the representative that he is on our behalf in Sacramento. He does a magnificent job. What I love about him is he doesn't shy away from the tough issues. He walks right into the middle of them. Very often he's sent there by his leadership because they know that he is willing to take him on, to grapple with him. He may come up, as he did recently, on high-speed rail with a little bit different answer than his leadership would have liked. But I also think that he was right. He was trying to rethink this, this proposal that we both believe is very important. And clearly, if you look down the road, beyond our own time here, it's going to become more and more important to the state. But how you assure its success and how you rethink some of the early choices that were made when people maybe weren't paying as much attention to the budget as they might have, he spent a lot of time doing that and cast what I think was a very, very courageous vote with a huge amount of heat coming his way. But that's what he does. That's what he does on behalf of the environment. That's what he does on behalf of the budget decisions. That's what he does on behalf of the education of our children. That's what he's doing. We're both slugging it out on behalf of the Delta and our water systems here in Northern California, trying to restore this magnificent, magnificent environmental asset, the largest estuarine delta system in the Eastern Pacific, on the western part of the Americas here. And it should not just be because of political power that you can destroy this magnificent system, which is also a huge economic energy system for our local economies and many, many small businesses, the fishermen, the independent business people who run the fishing boats, that run the ice houses, the gas stations, the docks, the marinas, and everything that goes along with that is key to the health of the Delta. And so we've been slugging it out on that. He's a great, great partner to have when you're debating public policy. Mark, thank you very much. So maybe now that we've given commercials for one another, we'll just leave while we're ahead. I gotta know when to leave, kid. But I'm going to take a couple of minutes and I'm going to run through some issues that this Congress has dealt with or hasn't dealt with. It's kind of an eclectic list. Hopefully it'll trigger some questions that you might have. But I want you, as you're sitting there and you're thinking about questions that you hope to be able to ask, don't feel constrained by the topics that I raised, because there's no shortage of issues and concerns that people have across the board. But I'm trying to focus a little bit on the activities of the Congress. First of all, in the last, let's just say 4 years, 2 years after President Obama was elected, and we had a majority in the House and the Senate, I participated in the most productive Congress since Medicare. Probably the most productive Congress, however the various scholars have measured it. Some say since World War II, and I'm very proud of that Congress. In the last 2 years, I've participated in now what is the least productive Congress in the history of the country, and that's because of gridlock from a lot of different positions. That's because of ideology trying to overwhelm policy. And it's a struggle that isn't complete. It's not complete even in our own country, and it may play itself out in a big way in this election. But it's from working 24/7 for 2 years to now you fly back and forth, and very often there's very little to do because they don't want these things to be dealt with. They don't believe there's a federal role, the majority in the House mainly, but also the Senate because of the filibuster rule. And so it's been a kind of a strange session. But let me just start off with some of the subjects. Already it's been mentioned, health care and the Supreme Court decision. I was very proud to be one of the chairs of one of the 3 committees that wrote the health care legislation. We worked very hard on it, and I was sure I wrote a constitutional law. And I can't tell you how excited I am as a progressive to have Justice Roberts say that I was right. It's very exciting. To me, this is the excitement. That after 2014, everybody in America will know, however their circumstances change and for whatever reasons they change, they will never lose their health insurance. Their children will never lose their health insurance. I'll stop with your applause. We're never going to do this evening, but thank you so much. Their children will never lose their health insurance. Their parents will never lose their health insurance. It doesn't matter whether it's death or it's divorce or it's economic hardship, the loss of a job, you're not going to lose your health insurance. The economic security, the message that sends to Americans, young and old, aspiring families, aspiring small business people. I can't tell you how many people have said this. Grandparents come up and they say, thank you so much that my grandchild can stay on his or her parents' policy until they're 26. It's a tough economy right now for new college graduates and others, and for families. Other people will say, you know, my son's just waiting. My daughter's just waiting for this health care bill to pass. They want to start their own business. But they can't lose the insurance for their children and their families. But if we have the exchanges, we have this policy, they can start their business. They're in a job now, they don't like it. They think they've got something to offer. I mean, it's entrepreneurial. It's entrepreneurial. You're free to do what you want to do. To pursue your dreams, to pursue your business, to pursue the opportunities that this country presents. And you're not bound, you're not locked into this position because employment's tied to, health insurance is tied to employment. The other very exciting thing to me is that pre-existing conditions. No more. No more pre-existing conditions. No more. You can't have health insurance if you're born with what we would say a birth defect or a condition, a tough medical condition. The insurance company say, no, we can't cover that. You've contracted cancer. We can't cover that. Or you're in the middle of your therapy for cancer and they say, well, we have a $100,000 limit. We have a $200,000. We have a $1 million limit. We have a lifetime limit. You're out. Well, where do I go to get treatment? Well, I'm sorry, but you're out. We're done. You don't get to do that anymore. You don't get to do that anymore. For the first time in the history of this country, being a female will no longer be a pre-existing condition. That's the fact. Small businesses today are getting tax credits. And we're seeing it in the uptake. The insurance companies are reporting this, that small businesses are coming to them and they're extending insurance to the employees because they got the help of tax credits to do that. Employees are going on the rolls of being coverage now, between now and 2014. We mentioned that students could stay. And the other one is this discussion about the federal mandate, and whether it's a tax or a fee or a mandate or whatever it is, but anyway, it turned out it's constitutional, it's legal, and it's the law. This point is very important, because in California, for people who decide that they don't want to buy insurance, they just simply don't want to buy it, they assume they're healthy, they're going to be fine, or they can't afford it. A much more difficult situation. But those individuals cost everyone else in society, in the state of California, about 15%. I think the state people tell us about 15% additional cost on your premiums. And we think they ought to be in the system. Now young people say, hey, I'm healthy, I don't need this, I don't have those problems you old people have and all that. They're doing great right until the time that the car hits their bike. And then they're in the emergency room, and then they're on the tab. And by bringing them into the system, it makes it all somewhat less expensive. The state of California is leading the way. I don't know, Mark, if you want to comment on developing the exchanges, so that in 2014 we'll be up and running. The governor has spent a lot of time on this. Diana Dooley has spent a lot of time on this. The legislature has spent a lot of time. As you know, there's some governors who are saying, we're not going to do any of this. Well, we said, you said you didn't want the federal government to do it all. You just said you didn't want one size fits all. That's the mantra. So we said to the states, you got 3 years to figure out what system you want. Oregon's going to have a different system than California. Washington's going to have a different system than Oregon. Utah's got a very different system, but kind of exciting. And Massachusetts, thank you to Mitt Romney, is already. Okay, well, the highway bill. The infrastructure bill, it was passed. Barbara Boxer, well-known conservative, worked with one of the most conservative members of the Senate, Emhoff from Oklahoma. And last March, they reported out a highway bill with a 2-year or 3-year extension. I think maybe 3 originally, but now 2, or let's say just 2. And the House refused to take it up. The House refused to take it up. Why? It was a bipartisan bill. It got 75 votes in the Senate, something we haven't seen in the Senate in a long, long time. But they wouldn't take it up. They didn't think this was the role of the federal government. They didn't think this was the proper role. The highway bill has been bipartisan. It's been a part of the federal government since the Second World War. It was started by Dwight Eisenhower in the matter of national security. They don't think it's the role of federal government. You won't all be able to see this, But this is when we started the highway system.
What it looked like.
And Kansas said they'd go ahead. And then they ran right into Oklahoma. So the 6-lane interstate system in America turned into be a farmer's road down the corn patch. One of the great things about the Library of Congress. But the other reason I think was they didn't want the president to get the benefit of the jobs that would have been created in March, April, May, June, July, and August today. So they held the bill, held the bill, held the bill, held the bill, held the bill. And in some parts of the country, you're already starting to shut down construction jobs because unless it stays this warm, but you know that in the northern tiers, weather's not going to not allow you to carry out the contract and you have to wait until next year. But the fact of the matter is, here is this, we're falling so far behind. Mark knows the infrastructure issues. In this state, I think that I'm right, the gas tax in the state barely covers now maintenance, right? No new projects out of gas tax, just maintenance. Part of that's because you're all driving more fuel-efficient automobiles, and which is a good thing, but the revenues are down. But the fact was we've had 13 extensions of this bill. So no city, no county, no state could let their big contracts, multi-year contracts, because they didn't know if the federal government was going to be there for the money, because we were doing 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. It's the greatest country in the world. We're running our infrastructure based upon 6 months, month-to-month tenancies. Well, no public agency can take that risk. A contractor is not going to sign up for a 5-year project, but we're only going to do the first 6 months. We're not sure if it's going to what's going to happen after that. I mean, it's just no way to run America. Student loans, I was very happy that we were able to keep interest rates from doubling on July 1st. We kept them at the current rate of 3 3/4% for students taking out new loans this year, students returning to students beginning to college. Saves them about $1,000 over the life of those loans. Still very concerned on the state side that in these tough economic times, states, not just California, matter of fact, California is not the worst by any shot, states are walking away from their public institutions. I think this is a big, big mistake. These public institutions, what they have contributed to the economic vitality of the United States in terms of innovation, discovery, and all the rest of it, and all of the research that they do. If we think that somehow you can just let that go, and this country will be the same, or this country will continue to be a leader, huge, huge mistake. Any comments on the education budget?
You'll have to forgive me because we're just starting this duet. We've known each other for a long time, but I feel
well, you're getting so comfortable there.
I'm just enjoying you watching him and watching. I go to these town halls just to watch him because he's the master. One comment about transportation and infrastructure. We just did a study, the California Transportation Commission just did a study that we are 300% underfunded just for the maintenance of our existing infrastructure. So my Republican colleagues say that there's more fat to cut, and there are inefficiencies in Caltrans, and I have plenty of hearings for oversight, and I'm doing a lot right now. But to think that we can, they're just in denial. So when you look at the cost, when Governor Schwarzenegger, I hate to even mention this period of time, I once got in trouble with him because I had a speech and I said, the governor has the potential to be the worst governor in the history of California. A few weeks later, I was at an event, he was very thin-skinned, and he said, "You said I'm the worst governor in the history of the state of California." And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be beaten to a pulp over it. And I said, no, I said you have the potential to be. And then I just left very quickly. But we have a real problem in denial about thinking that there's this waste, fraud, and abuse, and we can somehow take care of everything. In the meantime, our infrastructure, as George said, is just imploding on us. It's actually costing you more money. Channel 3 just did a story on how much it costs you just for the maintenance of your car because we're not able to keep up with the maintenance. So that's a problem. On the education side, he's been a great hero in trying to, the huge abuses of for-profit schools, basically ripping off kids, giving them an inadequate education, and leaving them with a lifetime of debt, as opposed to our public institutions in California that give people the opportunity for a magnificent career and to go get graduate degrees and get out part of the workforce. So George needs to take a lot of credit for just being, once again, an immovable, passionate person for the justice in this. We are in California, as part of the budget deal, restricted the amount of money that we will put into Cal grants for for-profit and for schools, and they have to reach a certain level of graduation rate and actual quality of education. So those are important things. But on the federal level, he took the lead on that.
And then we lost the majority, so we needed the state to fill in and take these schools that weren't doing what they did. And they weren't, in some cases, not accredited, and they did a great job on cutting off the Cal Grant money at the state legislature. The other sort of thing that's been coming along this year, got a lot of attention, is the new natural gas finds in the United States. Controversial in many ways, and not so controversial in other ways. It depends how you look at it, where you live, where your water table is, and who's doing the drilling. First, it was just sort of the wild, wild west out there, whether the wild west is in Pennsylvania or North Dakota or southern Utah. But I think the important point to understand is that this really is a rather remarkable find of energy under the United States, and we have to think about how we handle that. We've been doing fracking for a very long time. We just hadn't been doing it with respect to natural gas because nobody could quite figure it out. They used to come and say that they could get fracking is petroleum, natural gas, and sometimes oil that's locked in really tight sand, very, very tight. It's not in the liquid pool as you think about it when you go down and you start pumping oil out. You got to get it out of these sands. And they used to say, in Congress, I went on a couple of field trips in Wyoming and elsewhere to look at these sands. So I said, so how are you going to get it out of there? How are you going to get it out of there? They kept telling me you couldn't get it out, couldn't get it out. And they used to say, well, it's just, if we could just have one more tax break, we know we could get gas out of there. Well, along came a kind of a privateer, if you will, in a natural gas company on the East Coast and figured out how to do this, and now they're liberating using chemicals that were, when they first started, were not disclosed to the public, but now people raise so much hell in the States, they are disclosed, water and sand, and they're able to liberate the gas, and people are talking about it's enough natural gas for 100 years, 200 years. It's actually changed the flow of gas around. We had built a number of super ports to import liquefied natural gas from around the world. We're now changing those ports over to export the gas to the rest of the world because there's so much of it here. The price of gas is now, natural gas is around $2.50, and in most of Europe right now is somewhere between $13 and $18. And we're now seeing foreign investment coming to the United States in those industries where natural gas is the feedstock, in chemicals and agriculture, where it plays a heavy role. So it's something to pay attention to, but it's also very important, I think, in terms of the economy. I think we're now, we're importing. We have the least dependence on foreign oil in this country than we had in 17 years. We're drilling for more oil and gas around the country. We have more rigs, I think, operating than all of the rigs in the rest of the world combined. I'm not happy with all the places that they're operating, but they want to keep suggesting that the president's not doing anything about energy in this country. Thanks to the leadership of the California Air Resources Board and working out with the automobiles, we ended up with a national agreement of 54 miles per gallon over the next 15 years, I think. And we now see new engines, new technology, high mileage cars. I was in Sacramento in that garage right across from the Capitol, and every electrical charging place in the garage was taken. All these cars were, I think it was like 12 cars on that floor were all being charged with electric cars that people were using to come in and out of work. So it was kind of an eye-opener.
We can get to one.
I have a half of one outside. So that's what it is. The elementary, secondary education, we cannot pass a bill in the House of Representatives. They passed the bill out of the Senate committee, but they won't move until they see that we can pass the bill. We can't do that. Most of the members on the other side of the aisle on our committee do not believe that there's a federal role in education. They don't believe in the Title I program to provide additional assistance on behalf of poor and minority children. They say that was 1960. This is now, those people don't need our help anymore. Haven't heard that language in a long time. So they couldn't bring it to the floor because they knew they would have a huge internal fight. about simply getting rid of the federal programs on education. They introduced a bill. They essentially got no support, none. I think a few superintendents of schools supported it, 1 or 2 state superintendents. I introduced an alternative bill, and I was really excited because I got most all of the education groups, I got the civil rights organizations, but I was really excited to find out that I also got the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable. I thank the Republicans for driving them into my arms. It was the first time in 38 years. I reread the bill that night. All kidding aside, the Chamber and the Business Roundtable have been really, really good on education because they understand it. When they talk about the skills gaps, when they talk about the need for an educated population and an educated workforce, and on their needs, and the Business Roundtable and community colleges have been incredibly strong, and they know that there's a federal role for education in this country, whether it's research and development, whether it's supporting the big research universities, or providing opportunities in community colleges, or elementary, secondary education. They get it, they understand it, but that's not this Congress. Finally, not to ignore it, but there's obviously great concern about the economy. It's growing, but it's clearly not growing sufficiently to take up the slack that we have in employment, to get people back to work, and people have been out of work for a long time. We've had this started, and we slowed down again, and now we're starting to move again, and it's really tough for families. I think the calculation was that the families lost somewhere between $13 and $17 trillion in wealth. Black and Hispanic families lost almost 70% of their wealth in the downturn. Most of that, as we know, was in housing and equity that was presumed to be there. It wasn't when the financial scandals took down the mortgage markets and the economy, and now as we see the worldwide economy, we're very concerned whether there's enough growth in the economy. It's an interesting turn of events. They keep blaming uncertainty on Obama and saying that nobody knows what to invest, and now you see this week in the New York Times, a long discussion among business leaders, that the real concern is that we'll make too much of a drastic cut in the federal budget, and it will just stop the economy. We're very concerned about the British dove into the austerity plans a year and a half, 2 years ago, and now their economy's just in the tank, and of course, for a number of different reasons, some because of planned austerity, some because of austerity because of the financial problems in the countries. Europe is on that vein, and the question is, where is the demand going to come from to get the workforce? I don't think any of that's going to be solved before the election. There's a lot of discussion, and I want to just take a minute for this, and we'll open it up for questions, so think about your questions or write them out, whatever. There's a lot of discussion about nobody knows what to do because we're going to fall off the financial cliff. This is a cliff that the Congress built, that the Congress supported, and told everybody that, by God, they were willing to jump off this cliff if they didn't get their work done. So we passed a bill that said if we don't get a budget, we don't deal with the deficit issues and spending issues, that we were going to, in January, we would make an across-the-board cut, 50% out of the military and 50% out of domestic, very harsh, $1 trillion over the next 10 years would cut, and that was it. And it passed overwhelmingly, Republicans, Democrats. I voted for it. But fine, we've got to settle some of these issues. We've got to settle. President Obama offered to have a grand bargain, to sit down and work it out over a 20-year period and address the economy, but also address the long-term issues. They almost took that offer, and then they pulled their people out, pulled their speaker, the Speaker of the House, out of that meeting and wouldn't let them go back to continue to negotiate. But the point is this. So that they vote for this. The minute they voted for it, they tried to undo it. And the prime mover of undoing it is the military. They want all of the cuts to come out of the domestic agenda. They want $1 trillion in cuts because there can be no tax increase. There can be no tax reform where you use the tax form to pay for the government. The tax reform can, under their vision of the world, the tax reform can only be used to lower the tax rates mainly of the upper income people in this country. So all of the cuts have to make solve the deficit problem, and that $1 trillion, and I'll just say, if that happens, things get really, really tough for middle-class Americans in this country. Because this isn't just about programs for the poor, this is about a spectrum of programs across our society. We can go into it more depth. So it'll be interesting to see, because there was so much bravado, you know, if we don't do our job, we're going to do this. And hell, the ink wasn't dry. And they started signing up co-authors to protect the military. The military said, we already gave it the office, you know, we're done with this, so we're not participants. We didn't agree to that. So that's a quick run through of some of the things that have happened most recently, or haven't happened in the Congress. There's a lot of other issues. There's the issues of whether you know, what our plans are for Afghanistan. You know, Iraq is pretty well withdrawn, but still a lot of residual there. And what else is going on in the rest of the world, and the claims for you know, American military might in a number of areas, and even where it's being used in some cases, raises a lot of issues. And we've had the fire in Richmond, the refinery, and other issues. So open it up. It's about us hearing from you. So how do you want to manage? How are you going to do with your questions?
Welcome to Southwest Airlines, ladies and gentlemen.